What do you do when the family business that you saved, the hotel you transformed, is handed to someone else? Claire had spent years working tirelessly to restore Mountain Pine Lodge, pouring her heart and soul into every detail. But when her parents announced her brother Ethan as the new CEO, she was blindsided. This wasn't just about a promotion, it was a betrayal. Claire's sacrifice and success were brushed aside. Now, she faced a choice. Keep fighting for recognition or build something entirely her own. Stay tuned to find out how Claire takes control of her future, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories. What do you mean Ethan will be CEO? My voice echoed through the newly renovated lobby, the sound bouncing off the modern, mountain-inspired decor I had spent months perfecting. Every inch of this place had my fingerprints on it, every detail, every choice. And yet, here I was, standing in the center of the room, watching my family hand it all to Ethan. Mom's dismissive wave felt like a slap in the face. "Claire, honey, your brother has more natural leadership ability. You're too detail-oriented," she said, as if explaining something to a child. That's when Ethan strolled in, hands casually shoved into his pockets, wearing that smug smile I had seen since we were kids. "Hey sis, don't take it personally. Someone needs to handle the day-to-day stuff while I focus on the bigger picture." I felt my stomach tighten. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a betrayal. My name is Emily Anderson, and at 52, I never thought I'd find myself fighting for recognition in my own family's business. After 20 successful years in hotel management in Chicago, I gave up everything to come home to Colorado and save our struggling family hotel. The irony? I was the only one with real hospitality experience, while Ethan had bounced between jobs, never holding one longer than a year. Here's what really gets me. 8 months ago, my dad called me in tears, saying they were weeks away from bankruptcy. I didn't hesitate. I sold my condo in Chicago, cashed in my savings, and came home to help. The hotel was stuck in a time warp. Outdated decor, no social media presence, and reviews that made me cringe. I worked day and night to modernize everything from the reservation system to the lobby furniture. God knows how many nights I spent hunched over spreadsheets, negotiating with suppliers, and training staff. I even used my industry connections to get us featured in travel magazines, and it worked. The transformation was incredible. The Mountain Pine Lodge went from a 2-star nightmare to the talk of the town. Bookings doubled, and for the first time in years, we were actually turning a profit. Every detail, from the locally sourced artwork to the upgraded amenities, was chosen to create an unforgettable guest experience. But standing here now, watching Ethan smirk while my parents hand him everything I've worked for, I realize it never mattered to them. The worst part? They're announcing his promotion at tonight's staff meeting, the same meeting where I was supposed to present our record-breaking quarterly results. I can feel the eyes of our employees on me, especially Linda, our head housekeeper, who has been here for 20 years. They all know who really turned this place around, but, like me, they're forced to stand here and watch this farce play out, pretending this is somehow normal or fair. Let me take you back a bit to understand how we got here. The Mountain Pine Lodge has been in our family since my grandparents built it in 1971. I basically grew up in these halls, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. While other kids played house, I was helping Mom with check-ins and watching Dad handle maintenance issues. The hotel was my second home, and I loved every minute of it. But Ethan? He was different. 3 years younger than me, he never showed any interest in the family business. While I was studying hospitality management in college, he was bouncing between majors first architecture, then business, finally dropping out altogether to find himself. Mom and Dad never seemed bothered by this. "He's just creative," they'd say. "He needs time to figure things out." Meanwhile, I was building my career in Chicago, working my way up from front desk manager to regional director for a major hotel chain. Every success I had was met with lukewarm congratulations from my family. "That's nice, dear, but when are you coming home? When are you getting married?" It was never enough. When Dad called about the hotel's financial troubles, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The place was hemorrhaging money, outdated systems, inefficient processes, no real marketing strategy. The reviews online were brutal. "Stuck in the past, needs major updating, not worth the price." It broke my heart to see my family's legacy crumbling. I took a leave of absence from my job in Chicago, which eventually turned into a resignation, and dove headfirst into the rescue mission. The first month was just damage control, fixing broken equipment, updating the booking system, training staff on basic customer service. I dipped into my savings to replace the ancient carpeting and give the lobby a facelift. Every penny I spent was carefully calculated to maximize return on investment. What really gets me is that Ethan wasn't even here during all this. He was off in Denver, supposedly networking, but really just partying with his friends. He'd show up occasionally for family dinners, make a few vague suggestions about modernizing our approach, and disappear again. Yet somehow, in my parents' eyes, his occasional input was just as valuable as my daily grind. I kept telling myself it would be worth it, that once they saw the results, the improved ratings, the increased bookings, the positive reviews, they'd finally recognize my value. I guess I should have known better. The past 3 weeks have been a nightmare. Ethan struts around like he owns the place, making changes left and right without any understanding of how a hotel actually works. Just yesterday, he decided to cut our continental breakfast service to save money, apparently oblivious to the fact that our breakfast ratings are one of our biggest selling points. When I tried to show him the guest satisfaction data, he just laughed and said, "Numbers aren't everything, sis." But what really pushed me over the edge happened this morning. I walked in to find him firing Karen, our head of housekeeping who's been with us for 15 years. His reason? She wasn't flexible enough about his new scheduling system, a system that would have left us dangerously understaffed during peak checkout times. I managed to intervene and save her job, but the look of humiliation on her face will haunt me for a long time. I tried talking to Mom and Dad about it. I brought spreadsheets showing our progress, guest reviews praising our recent improvements, even financial projections for the next quarter. Dad just stared at his coffee, while Mom patted my hand and said, "Dear, you need to give your brother time to find his footing. He has such wonderful ideas." That's when I saw the for sale sign on the old Riverside Lodge as I was driving home. For years, it had been our main competitor, but it had fallen into disrepair the season before. I pulled into the parking lot, my mind racing. The property had so much untapped potential, better views than our hotel, closer to the ski slopes, and a much larger spa space. Sure, it needed work, but I knew exactly what I would do with it. I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at that sign. My mind wasn't just on the building. It was on every moment my parents had overlooked me in favor of Ethan, every achievement dismissed, every suggestion second-guessed, every contribution minimized. Something inside me snapped, or maybe it finally clicked into place. Without thinking twice, I called my realtor right there in the parking lot. The owners were eager to sell, and with my savings and stellar credit rating, I could make it happen. By the time I drove home, I had already scheduled a viewing for the next morning. For the first time in months, I felt energized, excited even. I wouldn't have to watch Ethan tear down everything I had worked so hard to build. Instead, I was going to build something new, something completely mine. Let them see what they gave up when they chose him over me. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. I threw myself into transforming the Riverside Lodge into something extraordinary. While Ethan was busy throwing parties at Mountain Pine Lodge, I was on site working with contractors, redesigning spaces, and assembling a team of top-tier hospitality professionals. I named it the Summit. Maybe a bit on the nose, but I wanted everyone to know exactly what I was aiming for. Word spread fast. Some people in town called me spiteful for competing against my own family. Others, especially those who'd worked with me at Mountain Pine, quietly cheered me on. My parents tried guilt-tripping me at first. "How could you do this to your brother? To us?" Mom would ask during our increasingly rare family dinners. I'd just smile and change the subject. Meanwhile, Ethan's mismanagement was starting to take its toll at Mountain Pine Lodge. Their reviews began to plummet, complaints about inconsistent service, maintenance issues, even cleanliness problems. 3 longtime staff members quit within the first month of his leadership. I heard through the grapevine that they had to slash their rates just to maintain occupancy. The Summit's grand opening was exactly 6 months after that fateful day in the lobby. I'll never forget my family's faces when they walked in. Mom's tight smile barely hiding her shock, Dad's wide eyes taking in the packed house, and Ethan's barely concealed anger. The local paper was there, taking photos and interviewing guests about Aspen's newest luxury destination. "You're trying to destroy us," Ethan hissed when he cornered me by the bar. "This is a direct attack on our family." I smiled, the calm in my voice almost unnerving. "No, Ethan. This is me succeeding despite our family." The contrast between the two hotels couldn't have been starker. While Mountain Pine Lodge struggled with basic maintenance, the Summit was making waves with its eco-friendly initiatives and luxury amenities. Every detail I had dreamed of implementing at the family hotel, everything that had been shot down, was now a reality here. From the locally sourced restaurant menu to the state-of-the-art spa facilities, everything was exactly as I had envisioned. But success came with its own set of challenges. Other hotels started copying our innovative booking system. People who had once been friendly started whispering behind my back about how I was tearing the family apart. Even some of my loyal guests from Mountain Pine Lodge expressed guilt about choosing sides. The real challenges came as the Summit gained momentum. Former vendors from Mountain Pine started getting pressure not to work with me. Mom had a powerful social circle in town, and suddenly, some longtime family friends stopped meeting me for our usual coffee dates. I even lost my spot on the local tourism board due to a supposed conflict of interest. But I wasn't about to let small-town politics derail everything I had built. When local vendors hesitated, I found better ones in Denver. When the tourism board dropped me, I focused on building direct relationships with ski tour operators. Every obstacle they threw at me only pushed me to be more innovative, more determined. Then came the biggest test of all. Mom and Dad showed up at my office one morning looking worried. The bank was threatening to call Mountain Pine's loans. Ethan's mismanagement had finally caught up with them. They wanted me to come back, not as CEO, of course, but to help Ethan learn the ropes. "We're family," Mom pleaded. "You can't just let the hotel fail." See, I looked at them both, sitting across from my desk in the office I'd built myself, and felt strangely calm. "I offered to help 8 months ago," I replied. "You chose Ethan. Now you have to live with that choice." Dad tried a different approach. "Think about your grandfather's legacy," he said quietly. "This hotel has been in our family for generations." "And I tried to preserve that legacy," I shot back. "You're the ones who handed it to someone who treats it like his personal playground." The whispers around town got nastier after that. I was the ungrateful daughter, the bitter sister, the woman who'd turn against her own family out of spite. Some days those rumors hurt more than I'd like to admit. But every morning I'd walk into the Summit's lobby, see my vision come to life, and know I'd made the right choice. My team became my new family. Many were former Mountain Pine employees who jumped ship, tired of Ethan's chaotic management style. They understood what I was building here wasn't about revenge, it was about creating something meaningful, something we could all be proud of. The breaking point came during the annual Colorado Luxury Hotels Awards. The Summit was nominated for Best New Boutique Hotel, and Mountain Pine Lodge was conspicuously absent from any category. I sat in the ballroom, surrounded by my team, when they announced our win. As I walked to the stage, I caught sight of my parents in the back of the room. They had shown up unannounced, probably expecting to support our family hotel, as they had for years. The look on their faces told me everything. Mom was fighting back tears, and Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. Ethan wasn't there. He had stopped attending industry events months ago, dismissing them as popularity contests. But everyone in that room knew what this moment meant. The student had officially surpassed the teacher. The detail-oriented daughter had built something better than the family legacy they had refused to trust her with. During my acceptance speech, I thanked my team, our guests, and even mentioned Mountain Pine Lodge, where I first fell in love with hospitality. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, a subtle ripple telling me they caught my dig. But it was the conversation afterward that really changed everything. A renowned travel magazine editor approached me for an interview. As we talked about the Summit's success, my parents hovered nearby, clearly listening. They heard every word as I described my journey, including how being passed over for CEO had pushed me to build something of my own. Sometimes the best success stories come from being underestimated, I said, loud enough for them to hear. That evening, the magazine editor told me they would be naming the Summit the best boutique hotel in the Rockies in their upcoming issue. The same issue would feature a piece on traditional hotels struggling to adapt, with Mountain Pine Lodge as their prime example. When the article came out, it hit our small town like a bomb. All the whispers about me being spiteful had to stop. The truth was clear. I had built something extraordinary while Mountain Pine Lodge was faltering, not because of me, but because of their own poor decisions. Looking back on everything, it's hard not to feel a mix of emotions. Part of me still hurts from the way my parents treated me, dismissing all I had done as if it meant nothing. But the bigger part of me feels liberated. I'm finally living life on my terms, not waiting for someone else's validation. When I walk into the Summit every morning, I'm reminded of what I've built with my own 2 hands. The vibrant lobby buzzes with life guests chatting excitedly about their plans for the day, staff moving efficiently with warm smiles. The faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingles with the crisp mountain air that drifts in whenever the doors open. It's everything I had wanted Mountain Pine Lodge to be, and seeing the Summit thrive gives me a deep sense of pride. My team at the Summit has become my family in ways I never expected. Many of them, like Linda and Isabella, are former employees of my parents' hotel who left because they saw the same lack of leadership I did. They've been instrumental in making the Summit a success, and their loyalty humbles me. Linda often jokes that she finally feels like her experience and ideas are valued, and I know exactly how she feels. Outside of work, I've started reconnecting with old friends. For years, I was so wrapped up in trying to prove myself to my parents that I let important relationships slip away. Now, I'm making time for coffee dates and hikes, rebuilding those connections. Some people from the town who initially criticized my decision to compete with my family have even come around, admitting they admire what I've accomplished. I've also started to find my place within the community again. Hosting events at the Summit has helped me reestablish old bonds and even create new ones. Just last month, we held a fundraiser for the local animal shelter in our new event space, and it was a huge success. Seeing people come together for a good cause reminded me why I wanted to work in hospitality in the first place, to create spaces that bring people joy and comfort. But it's not all perfect. There are moments, especially on quiet evenings, when I think about my parents and Ethan. As much as they've hurt me, I wish things could be different. I've caught myself wondering if they've ever truly understood the sacrifices I made to save our family's legacy. Still, I've come to realize that their approval isn't something I need anymore. My success, my happiness, they're mine, and no one can take them away. For so long, I lived in the shadow of their expectations, but now I'm finally standing in my own light. It was about 3 weeks after the Colorado Luxury Hotels Awards when my parents finally reached out again. They asked me to come over for dinner, just the 3 of us. I hesitated for a moment but decided to go. I wanted to hear what they had to say, even though I wasn't holding my breath for a real apology. When I arrived at the house, the atmosphere was different. My mom greeted me with a nervous smile, and my dad avoided eye contact, fiddling with his watch the way he always did when he was uncomfortable. Over dinner, they started with small talk, how the weather was unusually warm for the season, how they'd heard about the Summit's latest 5-star review. I could tell they were building up to something. Finally, my dad cleared his throat and said, "CLA, we wanted to say we're proud of what you've accomplished." My mom quickly added, "We know we haven't always shown it, but we do recognize how much work you've put into the Summit. It's remarkable." I wanted to feel happy about their words, but instead, they landed flat. It felt like too little, too late, especially after years of being dismissed. I nodded, but I already knew what was coming next. Sure enough, my mom jumped right into it. "Ethan's been struggling. The hotel isn't doing well, and he's in over his head. We were wondering if you could maybe guide him, help us get things back on track." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I let their words hang in the air as I really looked at them, my mom, her carefully manicured nails gripping her wine glass a little too tightly, and my dad staring at the tablecloth as if it might hold the answers to all their problems. "I offered to help a year ago," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I gave up my life in Chicago to save Mountain Pine Lodge. You chose to put Ethan in charge, knowing he wasn't ready, knowing I had the experience to make it succeed. You didn't want my leadership then, and now that things have fallen apart, you're asking me to step in. I'm sorry, but I can't do that. My mom opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. I'll give you advice if you want it. I can recommend strategies, suppliers, even training programs for the staff. But I'm not coming back to fix what Ethan has broken. That's not my responsibility anymore. They didn't know what to say. My dad muttered something about understanding my position, but his disappointment was clear. My mom, on the other hand, looked like she wanted to argue more, but for once, she didn't push it. Driving home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years. Setting those boundaries wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I wasn't going to keep bending over backward to make my parents happy or cleaning up Ethan's messes. I was choosing myself, my happiness, and my future. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a shift in how I carried myself. Saying no to my parents had given me the confidence to enforce boundaries in other areas of my life, too. I stopped over-explaining my decisions to people, whether it was about work or personal choices. I became more comfortable letting go of relationships that no longer served me, instead focusing on the ones that brought me joy and support. At the summit, we hit new milestones. Our occupancy rates were the highest in the region, and we began receiving inquiries from other boutique hotel owners asking for consulting advice. Meanwhile, my parents' hotel continued to decline. I heard they finally hired a professional hospitality consultant to try to turn things around. Ethan and I barely spoke, and I was okay with that. He didn't apologize or acknowledge what had happened, but I no longer needed him to. His bitterness was his burden to carry, not mine. The summit had become a reflection of everything I had worked for, my resilience, my vision, my independence, and as it flourished, so did I. One morning, standing in the lobby of the summit, I watched as sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the modern decor I had designed. A family walked past, laughing as they planned their day, while one of my staff expertly handed a couple their itinerary for a scenic snowshoe hike. It hit me in that moment how far I had come, not just professionally, but personally. For years, I had measured my worth by my parents' approval, by their ability to see and acknowledge my contributions. But now, I realized I didn't need that anymore. What I had built here wasn't just a hotel. It was a testament to my resilience, my creativity, and my ability to thrive despite the challenges thrown my way. The journey had been hard. Letting go of the hope that my family would change had been painful, but it also freed me. I no longer felt tied to the weight of their expectations or their dismissal. Instead, I felt proud. Proud of what I had created, proud of the team I had cultivated, and proud of the life I was living. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The Regional Hospitality Awards ceremony was the kind of event I used to dream about attending. The room was buzzing with excitement, filled with industry leaders, journalists, and hotel owners from across the state. As the announcer began to list the nominees for Boutique Hotel of the Year, I caught a glimpse of my mom and dad seated toward the back of the room. Their faces were unreadable, but I could sense the weight of what this moment meant to all of us. When the summit was announced as the winner, the room erupted into applause. My team cheered as I walked to the stage, my heart pounding as I accepted the award. I glanced at my parents, my dad gave me a small nod, and my mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement, something I'd long since stopped expecting, but still appreciated in its own way. After the ceremony, I joined my team in celebrating. My parents didn't approach me, and I didn't go to them. This was my moment, and I wanted to share it with the people who had helped me achieve it. I felt truly free. Free from the need for their approval. Free from the shadows of their choices. Success wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was capable, deserving, and enough. And as I raised a glass with my team that night, I knew I'd finally found peace. What do you do when the family you've always tried to please finally shows you just how little they value your contributions? When the hard work, dedication, and sacrifices you made are all overlooked in favor of someone who's never had to put in the effort? Emily spent years trying to earn her parents' approval, proving herself time and again with every achievement, every success. She turned around a dying business, saved their legacy, and built something incredible. But instead of recognizing her efforts, they handed it all to Ethan, the son who never cared about the family business. They chose him, and when everything fell apart, they came crawling back, expecting her to clean up his mess. But Emily made a decision that changed everything. She set boundaries. She said no. She walked away from the endless manipulation and chose herself. She built the Summit, a hotel that became everything Mountain Pine Lodge could have been if they had just trusted her from the start. And when her family tried to make her feel guilty, she didn't budge. Her success was her own, and she was finally living life on her terms. So here's the question. When people dismiss your worth, when they take you for granted, do you keep trying to win their approval, or do you walk away and build something even better? Let's talk about it in the comments. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
The hospital room felt eerily quiet, the soft beeps of the monitors punctuating the silence like a ticking clock. I cradled my newborn twins, their tiny faces scrunched in peaceful sleep, oblivious to the turmoil that was about to unfold. A gentle knock at the door startled me, and a nurse entered, a somber expression etched on her face. "Mrs. Archer, this letter arrived for you," she said, her voice laced with poorly concealed pity. I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly. As soon as the nurse left, I tore it open, my heart pounding in my chest. The words seemed to blur before my eyes, but one phrase stood out in stark relief. I want a divorce. My world shattered in that moment. Calvin, the man I had loved and trusted, the one I thought would stand by my side through thick and thin, had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. The letter went on to reveal his affair, his decision to abandon me and our children for another woman. Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I clutched my babies closer, as if they were the only anchors keeping me from drifting away into a sea of despair. How could he do this to us? After years of struggling with infertility, these precious little ones were supposed to be the culmination of our dreams, the embodiment of our love. But Calvin's absence spoke volumes. He didn't even bother to show up for their birth, too consumed by his selfish desires to witness the miracle we had fought so hard to achieve. The man I thought I knew had become a stranger, and the life I had envisioned for us was nothing but a cruel illusion. In that moment, I made a silent vow to my children. I would be the strength they needed. I would protect them from the pain and betrayal that their father had inflicted upon us. And I would rise above this, not as a victim, but as a survivor, forging a new path for myself and my family. It was a long, sleepless night, punctuated by the soft cries of my babies and the shattering of my own heart. But as the first rays of dawn filtered through the window, I knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the shackles of a broken marriage and a broken man. I clutched the divorce papers like a lifeline, my knuckles turning white with the sheer force of my grip. Calvin's words cut deeper than any knife, his cruelty slicing through the very core of my being. "You're delusional if you think you can handle raising those brats on your own," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You'll fail as a mother, just like you failed as a wife." My brother Evan, who had taken me in after I left the hospital, placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "Don't listen to him, sis. He's just trying to hurt you." Calvin scoffed, his lips twisted into a sneer. "Hurt her? I'm just telling the truth. She's nothing but a burden, and those kids are better off without her." I flinched, his words like physical blows, but Evan's presence gave me strength. "Get out of my house," he growled, his usually gentle demeanor replaced by a protective fury. Calvin shrugged, his cold eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before turning on his heel and leaving. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the soft whimpers of my newborn twins in the nursery. Evan enveloped me in a warm embrace, and I clung to him, my body shaking with the force of my sobs. How could he be so cruel? I choked out, my voice muffled by his shoulder. "He's a coward," Evan said, his voice laced with disgust. "But you're stronger than him, Miranda. You've always been the stronger one." His words resonated deep within me, igniting a spark of determination that had been flickering beneath the pain and betrayal. I pulled back, wiping the tears from my eyes, and nodded. "You're right," I said, my voice steadier than I had expected. "I can't let him break me, not when I have these two precious lives depending on me." Evan smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "That's my sister. Now let's focus on getting you and the twins settled. You're safe here, and we'll figure out the next steps together." As I held my babies close, their soft breaths brushing against my skin, I knew that Evan was right. Calvin might have shattered our family, but he couldn't destroy the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. I would rise above his cruelty, his insults, and his attempts to diminish me. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story of resilience and triumph. The soft coos of my twins filled the air as I rocked them gently, their tiny fingers curled around mine. It had been a few months since I had taken refuge at Evan's place, and the wounds of Calvin's betrayal were slowly starting to heal. A knock at the door interrupted my reverie, and Evan poked his head in. "Hey, you've got a visitor. It's Derek." My heart skipped a beat at the mention of my old college friend. Derek had been a constant source of support during those tumultuous times, his unwavering friendship a lifeline in the midst of the storm. "Send him in," I called out, unable to suppress the smile that crept across my face. Derek stepped into the nursery, his warm grin instantly brightening the room. "There's my favorite little family," he said, his eyes twinkling with affection. "Derek, it's so good to see you," I said, rising to embrace him with one arm, the other cradling my precious bundle. He returned the hug with gentle care, mindful of the fragile lives nestled against me. "You're looking well," he murmured, pulling back to study my face. "Motherhood suits you." I felt a flush of pride at his words, a stark contrast to the constant barrage of insults and put-downs from Calvin. Derek had a way of making me feel valued, seen, and understood in a way that my ex-husband never could. "Thanks for being here," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you and Evan." Derek waved a dismissive hand. "Don't mention it. That's what friends are for." His expression grew serious, and he lowered his voice. "Have you given any thought to the legal proceedings?" I nodded, my grip on my children tightening instinctively. "I want to fight for full custody. Calvin doesn't deserve to be a part of their lives, not after the way he treated us." Derek's jaw clenched, his eyes hardening. "That bastard doesn't deserve anything," he spat, his usual composure slipping for a moment. "But don't worry, Miranda, I'll make sure he pays for what he's done." A surge of gratitude washed over me, and I reached out to squeeze his hand. "Thank you, Derek, for everything." His features softened, and he returned the gentle pressure. "You don't have to thank me. Just focus on being the amazing mother I know you are, and leave the rest to me." As Derek left, I couldn't help but feel a sense of renewed strength and determination. With him by my side, I knew that I had a fighting chance at building the life my children deserved, a life free from the toxicity and pain that Calvin had brought into our world. The road ahead might be long and arduous, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hope blossoming in my heart. Calvin might have shattered my dreams, but with the unwavering support of those who truly cared for me, I knew that I could pick up the pieces and create something even more beautiful, a future where my twins could thrive, loved and protected, untainted by their father's cruelty. The soft glow of the laptop screen cast a warm hue across Derek's face as he leaned back in his chair, brow furrowed in concentration. I watched him intently, my heart thrumming with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "Are you sure about this, Miranda?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Once we set this in motion, there's no turning back." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. He brought this on himself. It's time he faced the consequences of his actions. Derek let out a long exhale, running a hand through his hair. "All right, I've gathered enough evidence to bury him, but we need to be smart about how we play this." Leaning forward, he began to outline his plan, his words precise and calculated. "We'll start by issuing a formal demand for a fair settlement, custody, child support, and a substantial alimony. If he refuses, we'll have no choice but to go public with the information we have on his shady business dealings." My stomach twisted at the mention of Calvin's professional misdeeds. The man I had once loved and trusted had been living a double life, engaging in fraud and deceit that threatened to unravel his entire career. Do you really think he'll cave? I asked, my voice laced with doubt. Calvin's always been so arrogant, so sure of himself. Derek's eyes hardened, his jaw set in a firm line. He'll have no choice. Not when the evidence is this damning. We've got him cornered, Miranda. It's time to make him pay for what he's done. A surge of determination coursed through me, fueled by the memory of Calvin's cruelty and the pain he had inflicted upon me and my children. I had spent too long cowering in his shadow, allowing his manipulation and abuse to dictate the course of my life. No more. Let's do it, I said, my voice steady and resolute. I'm ready to take back control. Derek's lips curved into a grim smile, and he nodded. Then, let's make that bastard squirm. Over the next few weeks, we meticulously prepared our case, gathering every shred of evidence and fortifying our legal strategy. Derek was a force to be reckoned with, his razor-sharp intellect and unwavering determination a formidable combination. As the day of the mediation approached, I could feel the tension building, like a coiled spring waiting to be released. Calvin had no idea what was coming, and I couldn't help but savor the thought of wiping that smug grin off his face. When the moment finally arrived, I steeled myself, drawing strength from the knowledge that I was no longer fighting alone. Derek was by my side, a steadfast ally in the battle against my former tormentor. As Calvin strutted into the room, his arrogance practically radiating from his pores, I felt a surge of power course through my veins. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The game was on, and this time I held all the cards. The tension in the room was palpable as Calvin swaggered in, his cocky demeanor a stark contrast to the grim expressions on our faces. Derek took the lead, his voice calm and measured as he laid out the terms of our proposal. We're prepared to offer a fair settlement, he said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. Full custody of the children for Miranda, along with child support and substantial alimony payments. Calvin's eyes narrowed, his lip curling in disdain. Are you kidding me? You expect me to agree to those outrageous demands? I could feel my blood boiling, but before I could speak, Derek raised a hand, silencing me. It's a generous offer, given the circumstances, he said, his voice taking on a razor-sharp edge. Calvin scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. And what circumstances would those be? You have no leverage here. Derek's expression hardened, and he reached into his briefcase, retrieving a thick file. I wouldn't be so sure about that. With a flick of his wrist, he scattered the contents of the file across the table, revealing a damning trail of evidence, financial records, email correspondence, and detailed accounts of Calvin's fraudulent activities within his company. The color drained from Calvin's face as he rifled through the documents, his bravado evaporating like mist in the morning sun. Where did you get this? That's not important, Derek said, his voice laced with steel. What matters is that we have more than enough evidence to bury you, professionally and personally. Calvin's eyes darted between us, his mask of arrogance crumbling as the realization of his predicament sank in. What do you want? He growled, his hands clenched into tight fists. Exactly what we asked for, I spoke up, my voice steady and unwavering. The settlement, no contest on custody, and your silence. Agree to our terms, and this information stays buried. Calvin's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with barely contained rage. For a long moment, the room was deathly silent, the weight of our ultimatum hanging heavy in the air. Finally, he let out a sharp exhale, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, you win. A surge of triumph coursed through me, but I refused to let it show on my face. Calvin had brought this upon himself, and for the first time, he was the one left powerless, stripped of his arrogance and control. As he scrawled his signature on the settlement papers, his hand trembling with barely contained fury, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The nightmare was finally over, and I had emerged victorious, not just for myself, but for my children. Derek and I exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of our shared triumph passing between us. We had played the game, and we had won, leaving Calvin to face the consequences of his own actions. As we gathered our belongings and prepared to leave, Calvin fixed me with a venomous glare. This isn't over, he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. I met his gaze unflinchingly, a newfound strength burning within me. Yes, it is, I said, my voice unwavering. You lost the moment you decided to betray us. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving Calvin to stew in the wreckage of his own making. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice had prevailed, and I had reclaimed the power he had tried so desperately to strip away. The future was uncertain, but for once, I didn't fear it. With my children by my side and the unwavering support of those who truly cared for me, I knew that I could weather any storm that came my way. Calvin had made the mistake of underestimating me, and now he would pay the price. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the silent kitchen as Calvin hurled his tumbler against the wall, the amber liquid splattering across the pristine tiles. His face was contorted with rage, his knuckles white from the force of his clenched fists. "That bitch," he snarled, pacing like a caged animal. "How dare she try to ruin me?" His mistress, Samantha, watched him with a mixture of fear and disgust, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. "Maybe you should have thought about before you decided to screw her over," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. Calvin whirled on her, his eyes wild with fury. "Shut your mouth," he growled, taking a menacing step forward. "This is all her fault. She's the one who pushed me into this." Samantha recoiled, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Don't you dare try to blame her for your own mistakes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You made your bed, Calvin. Now you have to lie in it." Calvin's laughter was bitter and mirthless. "Oh, I'll make her pay all right. She thinks she's won, but I'm just getting started." As he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the windows, Samantha sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The illusion of their perfect life together was rapidly unraveling, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had made a grave mistake. Meanwhile, I sat across from Derek, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee as I recounted the events of the mediation. He listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I can't believe he had the audacity to threaten you," he said, shaking his head in disgust. "The man has no shame." I shrugged, trying to mask the residual fear that still lingered in the depths of my heart. "It's just empty bravado," I said, forcing a smile. "He's all bark and no bite." Derek's expression darkened. "I wouldn't be so sure," he murmured, his voice laced with concern. "Calvin's a desperate man, and desperate men are capable of dangerous things." A chill ran down my spine but I pushed the uneasy feeling aside. "Even if he tries something, we'll be ready," I said, my voice resolute. "We have the upper hand now." Derek nodded, but the worry lines etched across his forehead didn't fade. "Just promise me you'll be careful," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand in his. "I don't want anything to happen to you or those beautiful kids of yours." I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "We've come too far to let him win now." As the days passed, Calvin's world continued to crumble around him. News of his professional misdeeds began to leak, spreading like wildfire through the business community. Clients and colleagues alike turned their backs on him, horrified by the extent of his deceit. Samantha, unable to bear the weight of the scandal, packed her bags and left, disappearing without a trace. Calvin was left to face the consequences of his actions alone, his once powerful empire reduced to ashes. And through it all, I watched from the sidelines, a sense of vindication washing over me. Calvin had thought he could break me, but in the end, his own arrogance and greed had been his undoing. As I held my children close, their innocent laughter filling the air, I knew that I had won the greatest victory of all, the ability to provide them with a safe, loving home, free from the toxic influence of their father. Calvin's collapse was a harsh lesson in karma, a reminder that no matter how powerful or invincible one might seem, the truth always has a way of catching up. And as I looked towards the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and possibility, knowing that I had emerged from the ashes of my past, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The sharp ring of my phone cut through the peaceful silence of the evening. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my heart sink. It was Derek. "Hello?" I answered, a sense of dread settling in the pit of my stomach. "Miranda, you need to turn on the news. Right now." Derek's voice was laced with urgency, sending a chill down my spine. Without a word, I grabbed the remote and switched on the television, my breath catching in my throat as the headline flashed across the screen, local businessmen embroiled in fraud scandal. And there, larger than life, was Calvin's face, his expression a mixture of defiance and barely concealed panic as he was swarmed by a pack of ravenous reporters. "Mr. Archer, is it true that you've been embezzling funds from your company?" one of them shouted, thrusting a microphone in his face. Calvin recoiled, his jaw clenched tight. "No comment," he growled, pushing his way through the throng. But the reporters were relentless, their questions growing more pointed and accusatory with each passing second. "What about the allegations of insider trading? Can you confirm or deny your involvement? How do you respond to the claims that you've been bribing government officials to secure lucrative contracts?" Calvin's face contorted with rage, his mask of composure slipping as the weight of the accusations bore down on him. "Get those cameras out of my face!" he snarled, lashing out at the nearest reporter. The scene descended into chaos, a flurry of shouting and jostling bodies as Calvin fought to escape the relentless onslaught of questions and accusations. I watched in stunned silence, my heart pounding in my chest as the reality of what was unfolding hit me. This was it, the final nail in the coffin of Calvin's once pristine reputation. As the news coverage shifted to a panel of analysts dissecting the scandal and speculating about the potential legal ramifications, I felt a surge of vindication coursing through my veins. Calvin had brought this upon himself, and now the world was bearing witness to the true depths of his depravity. The phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my trance. It was Derek again. "Did you see it?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "I saw it," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Derek let out a long exhale. "Yes, it is, and there's no turning back now." A heavy silence hung between us, the weight of the situation settling like a thick fog. "Are you okay?" Derek asked, his voice softening with concern. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm okay," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "This is what we wanted, isn't it? For him to face the consequences of his actions." "Yes, but that doesn't make it any easier," Derek said gently. "You're allowed to feel conflicted, Miranda. This is a lot to process." I swallowed hard, my gaze drifting to the twin cribs in the corner of the room, where my precious babies slept peacefully, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around them. "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I have to stay strong. For them. They deserve a life free from the toxic legacy their father has left behind." Derek was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was laced with a quiet pride. "You're an incredible woman, Miranda Archer. Never forget that." As I ended the call and set the phone aside, I couldn't help but reflect on the long and arduous journey that had led me to this moment. Calvin's public disgrace was the final blow, the culmination of his own selfish actions and misdeeds. And yet, as I watched the news footage replaying in an endless loop, I felt no sense of triumph or satisfaction, only a profound sadness for the man he had become, and a fierce determination to ensure that my children would never bear the scars of his misguided choices. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Calvin's reign of terror was over, and it was time for me to step into the light, embracing the future with open arms and a heart full of hope. The soft glow of birthday candles flickered across the faces of my loved ones, their smiles warm and radiant as they gathered around the twins' cake. It was hard to believe that an entire year had passed since that fateful day in the hospital, the day my world had been shattered by Calvin's betrayal. But as I looked around the room, surrounded by the people who had stood by me through the darkest of times, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude and hope. Evan, his eyes shining with pride, beamed at me from across the table, his unwavering support a constant source of strength. And beside him sat Derek, his hand resting comfortingly on my arm, a silent reminder that I was no longer alone. The twins giggled and clapped their hands, oblivious to the tumultuous journey that had brought us to this moment. For them, this was simply a day of celebration, a chance to revel in the unconditional love that surrounded them. As the birthday song faded into a chorus of cheers and laughter, I couldn't help but reflect on the long and winding road that had led me here. The pain and heartache of Calvin's betrayal, the fear and uncertainty that had threatened to consume me, all of it had been a crucible, forging me into a stronger, more resilient version of myself. No longer was I the meek, downtrodden woman who had cowered in the shadow of her husband's cruelty. I was a survivor, a warrior, who had stared down the demons of my past and emerged victorious. "Blow out the candles, Mommy," one of the twins exclaimed, their tiny voice cutting through my reverie. I smiled, leaning down to press a kiss to each of their foreheads before taking a deep breath and extinguishing the flickering flames with a single, decisive puff. A chorus of cheers erupted around the table, and I felt a warmth bloom in my chest that had nothing to do with the candles. This was my life now, a life filled with love, laughter, and the promise of endless possibilities. As the party wound down and our guests began to trickle out, Derek lingered behind, his gaze soft and affectionate as he watched me tidy up. "You've come so far, Miranda," he said, his voice laced with pride. "I can't even begin to tell you how amazed I am by your strength." I paused, turning to face him with a grateful smile. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You were the one who helped me find my way back when I thought I was lost forever." Derek shook his head, his eyes shining with a quiet intensity. "You found your own way," he said, taking a step closer. "I was just lucky enough to walk beside you." Our gazes locked, and in that moment the air seemed to crackle with a charged energy, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had been forged between us through fire and adversity. Before I could second-guess myself, I closed the distance between us, my lips finding his in a tentative, exploratory kiss. Derek froze for a heartbeat before melting into the embrace, his arms wrapping around me with a tenderness that threatened to undo me. When we finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, I couldn't help but let out a tremulous laugh. "I never thought I'd find happiness again," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek cupped my face in his calloused hands, his eyes shining with a fierce determination. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Miranda, and I'll spend every day making sure you get it." As he pulled me into another searing kiss, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future untainted by the ghosts of my past. Calvin's shadow no longer loomed over me, for I had stepped into the light, embracing the strength and resilience that had been forged in the fires of adversity. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't fear the unknown. With my children by my side and the love of a good man to guide me, I knew that I could conquer any obstacle that dared to cross my path. This was my life, my story, and I was the author of my own destiny. I woke up to the shrill sound of my phone ringing, Jane's number flashing on the screen. Dread coiled in my gut as I answered, her venomous voice slicing through the line. "Pack your bag, Sarah. Mark's through with you. We found someone better, so there's no point in crying now." My heart sank, but a flicker of defiance ignited within me. After all I'd sacrificed for this thankless family? "I won't leave until we bury Stan, and I settle a few things. This isn't over." I hung up, hands trembling. Marrying Mark had been my greatest mistake, blinded by the hope of giving his daughter Ashley the loving home I'd craved. But his mother Jane's iron grip on the family had steadily crushed that dream, reducing me to a glorified maid. I dragged myself to the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee offering little comfort. Stan's faithful golden retriever Bailey nuzzled my hand, his warm eyes conveying a sympathy this household sorely lacked. As I stroked his fur, I steeled myself for the emotional onslaught to come. The day passed in a blur of funeral preparations, punctuated by Jane's scathing remarks about my inadequacies as a wife. Mark remained emotionally distant as ever, while Ashley openly mocked my grief. Only Stan's hallowed presence in the silent casket brought me solace. At the wake, I found myself unconsciously gravitating towards Stan's bedside photographs, treasured images of the loving grandfather he'd been before illness stole his vitality. In those final months, our bond had blossomed from my role as his caregiver into a friendship forged by shared suffering. Amidst the hushed condolences, a firm hand squeezed my shoulder. I turned to see Lawyer Jenkins, Stan's trusted confidant, his somber gaze conveying a world of meaning. "He prepared for this," he murmured. "We'll discuss it soon." Those cryptic words offered a glimmer of hope, But Jane's incendiary glares reminded me that this family's axe would fall swiftly upon me once the niceties concluded. Perhaps Stan had foreseen their treachery and made provisions, a lifeboat in this turbulent sea of heartbreak and deceit. As mourners trickled out, I lingered beside Stan's casket, gently brushing away a stray tear. Though the path ahead seemed bleak, a renewed determination took root. Whatever storm loomed, I would weather it with the same resilience that had carried me through life's earlier tragedies. Stan's gruff voice echoed in my mind. "You're tougher than you look, kid." With a steadying breath, I vowed to honor the faith he'd placed in me, no matter how turbulent the days ahead might be. I settled onto the worn couch, cradling a steaming mug of chamomile tea. Even its soothing aroma couldn't dispel the ache that had taken root ever since that dreadful phone call. As the rain pattered against the window, memories of my tumultuous past resurfaced, unbidden. "Sarah, honey, you've got to pull yourself together." My Aunt Maggie's voice rang in my ears, as clear as the day I'd arrived on her doorstep at 16, clutching the tattered remnants of my childhood. "Your folks wouldn't want you moping around feeling sorry for yourself." I'd nodded numbly, my parents' sudden passing still an open wound. With no other family, Aunt Maggie had taken me in, her tough love the anchor that kept me from drifting entirely. Those first few years had been a blur of grief counseling, part-time jobs, and fighting to keep my grades up amid the emotional turmoil. But Aunt Maggie's watchful guidance, coupled with an indomitable will I'd inherited from my father, had propelled me through the darkness. "You've got to make your own way, kid," she'd said gruffly, stubbing out her cigarette. "The world ain't gonna hand you nothing on a silver platter." Her words had rung true through the grueling years of physical therapy school, working double shifts at the diner to make ends meet. But I'd clawed my way to the top, fueled by a burning drive to craft the stable life I'd been denied. That's what had drawn me to Mark. His daughter Ashley's haunted eyes had mirrored my own orphaned youth. I'd been determined to spare her the same loneliness that had nearly consumed me, resolving to create the nurturing family I'd craved. How tragically those noble intentions had been perverted by the corrosive influence of Mark's mother Jane and her incessant belittling. With each snide remark, each deliberate slight, she'd chipped away at my sense of self-worth. "Did you really think someone like you could be part of our family?" Her nasal whine grated in my mind's ear. "You're nothing but a charity case, letting us support you out of pity." I forced the memory away, fingers tightening around the ceramic mug. Jane's disdain had only been exacerbated by Ashley's escalating cruelty. My treasured childhood keepsakes inexplicably misplaced, the framed photos of my parents somehow accidentally shattered. Mark had been my sole ally in those dark days, his smiles and squeezes of reassurance the only thing anchoring me amidst the emotional tempest. Yet even his support had waned as the years wore on, his commitment to appeasing his domineering mother slowly eclipsing the vows we'd sworn. I sipped the tea, its warmth a fleeting comfort. While the path before me seemed daunting, Stan's parting words remained a rallying cry. I may have been the underdog, battered and browbeaten, but the same fighting spirit that had delivered me through life's earlier trials was still alive. "This isn't the end," I murmured aloud, as if uttering the vow could render it real. Not by a long shot. Whatever treachery Jane and her cohorts had concocted, I would meet it head-on with the same resilience that had defined my journey. They'd sown the wind through years of emotional torture. Now it was time to reap the whirlwind. The rhythmic beeping of the machines provided a somber soundtrack as I gently sponged Stan's withered arms. His labored breaths rattled in the stillness of the bedroom we'd converted into his sick room. "Easy there, kiddo." His gravelly voice broke the silence, his trembling hand patting mine. "You've got to take it easier on yourself. Jane and that wretched brood of hers aren't worth this much fuss." I managed a weary smile, brushing a damp strand of hair from his brow. "You know I can't do that, Stan. You're the only one in this family who's treated me like, well, family." He harumphed, those rheumy eyes holding a glimmer of tenderness. "Ain't no fault of yours this sorry lot turned out so sour. If I could do it over again." His voice trailed off with a wistful sigh. In those unguarded moments, I caught fleeting glimpses of the past that weighed so heavily on him, the long hours invested in his medical practice, the slow fracturing of his household as his wife and children's bitterness took root. "I won't let you bear this burden alone," I said firmly, meaning every word. Stan's gruff humanity amidst the relentless cruelty had been my sole lifeline these past few years. He squeezed my hand, his gaze earnest. "Mark's gonna try to turn you out soon as I'm gone. You know that, don't you? Already got the papers drawn up to cast you aside like some busted piece of equipment." First, my throat tightened at the casual viciousness, but I gave a resolute nod. "Then we'll just have to make sure that doesn't happen." A ghost of a smile played across Stan's lips as he patted my hand again. "Let me tell you a little story about this prissy little tax inspector who came sniffing around a few years back." I settled in to listen, savoring these moments of wry camaraderie and hard-fought wisdom. Whatever challenges loomed, having Stan in my corner was the greatest reassurance I could ask for. In the days that followed, I doubled my efforts to ease Stan's discomfort, our conversations taking on a bittersweet poignancy. Whether regaling me with pranks from his medical school days or offering nuggets of unexpected life advice, he seemed determined to share every scrap of himself before the end. The night I found him slumped over his bedside table, I thought my world had shattered irrevocably. "Stan! Stan!" I shook his shoulders frantically until those eyes flickered open, his breathing shallow. He gripped my arm with surprising strength, his gaze boring into mine. "Sarah, you listen to me, you hear? I'm leaving you set up proper." A racking cough cut him off as I fumbled for the emergency call button. "Save your strength, Stan. The paramedics are on their way." He wheezed, mustering what little remained of his formidable will. "Don't." Another cough racked his brittle frame. "Don't let them." I squeezed his hand, blinking back hot tears. "I won't, Stan. I promise." Those cloudy eyes held mine for a heartbeat longer before rolling back in his head. Grief engulfed me, yet within its depths smoldered a renewed determination, a promise to honor his faith and make good on those vows, no matter who stood in my way. His final, wheezing exhalation marked the end of an era and the beginning of my war against those who would see me crushed. The days blurred together into an endless cycle of medications, sponge baths, and Stan's labored breathing. I clung to his bedside, savoring each lucid moment like a priceless gem amidst the fog of his deterioration. "You're doing great, kid." He'd rasped those words repeatedly, his papery hand enveloping mine with a surprising warmth. "Don't let them grind you down, you hear?" I'd nod mutely, throat constricted by the emotion those simple reassurances stirred. In those moments, Stan's rough compassion outshone the cold indifference that had seeped from the rest of the household. Jane's periodic sweeps through the sick room were accompanied by her trademark snide comments about the stale air and my apparent incompetence. "Honestly, Sarah, couldn't you have opened a window? Or did they not cover basic hygiene in that cow college you attended?" Mark would trail in her wake, features etched in discomfort, whether from his father's condition or his mother's histrionics, I could never tell. His gaze would slide past mine, our once warm connection frayed by years of eroding resentment. Ashley, for her part, made no attempt to mask her disdain for the grim realities unfolding. I can't be around all this dying oldness," she'd sneer, flouncing from the room with a roll of her eyes. "It's like totally morbid." Only Bailey, Stan's faithful golden retriever, provided a constant, uncomplicated source of comfort. He'd settle at the foot of the bed, his liquid brown eyes fixed on Stan's withered form as if standing in unwavering vigil. In those still moments, I could almost convince myself that affection still flickered in this hollow shell of a home. Then, one leaden afternoon, chaos erupted, Stan's heart monitor shrilling as his frame contorted with a massive seizure. I shouted for help as Jane and the others came running, profane curses spilling from their lips. The paramedics arrived with practiced urgency, blocking me from reaching Stan's convulsing body. Through the tangle of limbs and shouted orders, I locked eyes with him for the barest instant, those cloudy irises holding a lifetime of rueful regret and a silent plea. At the hospital, a grim-faced doctor briefed us in terse clinical tones about Stan's catastrophic stroke and diminishing oxygen levels. The prognosis was grim. Even if he regained consciousness, his quality of life would be severely compromised. "What about extraordinary measures?" Jane cut in, her voice shrill with insistence. "Surely there are procedures." The doctor raised a hand, shaking his head. In cases this severe, it would only serve to prolong the inevitable pain and suffering. I would advise exploring palliative options and preparing for... No, Jane's shriek lanced through the hushed waiting room. He's not giving up that easily, not while I still need... She caught herself, shooting a furtive glance at the doctor before smoothing her face into an unconvincing mask of grief. I watched in sickened silence, the grotesque reality finally crystallizing. They didn't care about Stan's comfort or dignity. He represented their final hope for securing an inheritance, no matter how much suffering it cost him. My hands clenched with impotent rage, even as Jane turned those glinting eyes upon me in wordless warning. 2 days later, the machines powering Stan's ravaged form finally fell silent. As his loved ones clustered around with practiced solemnity, I felt his spirit release in one final sigh of liberation. The shackles of their greed forever broken. My role as caregiver had ended, but a new passenger had boarded this runaway train of heartbreak and betrayal. Cold, implacable vengeance. Jane's cruel gaze drilled into me like a dagger's point, but this time I met it with steely defiance. Pack your things and get out. Her nasal tones cut through the stifling air like a scythe. You're utterly useless to this family now. A tremor of grim satisfaction coursed through me as I straightened my spine. I'm not going anywhere, I said quietly, until we put Stan to rest, and I settle a few scores that are long overdue. I stood my ground as Jane's face purpled with apoplectic rage. How dare you make demands after everything we've done for you? She sputtered. We kept a roof over your worthless head out of pity. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside her. Sarah, maybe we should all take a step back and... Don't you coddle this ingrate. Jane's shrill tones sliced through his attempts at diplomacy. I want her out before the funeral. She'll only make a spectacle with her hysterics. Jaw clenched. I fought for composure in the face of her venomous tirade. Exploding in impotent fury would only vindicate her disdain. Ashley sidled up beside her grandmother, smirking derisively. Yeah, beat it, Sarah. We don't need some sad sack charity case raining on the parade. She snapped her gum obnoxiously. It'll be a relief not having you moping around anymore. I fixed my gaze on Mark, willing him to reclaim the decency I'd once loved him for, but his eyes skittered away guiltily, and I knew in that moment he'd traded his backbone for Jane's approval long ago. Mustering every ounce of poise, I held up a staying hand. I'll go once we've laid Stan to rest properly. After that. I let the implication hang, heavy as a guillotine blade. Jane opened her mouth, but whatever retort she intended withered in the face of my resolute stare. For once her raptor glare had found its match. The following days were a study in forced civility and bitten tongues. Only when making the requisite funeral arrangements did our battle lines dissolve briefly into an uneasy truce. Jane may have been a viper, but even she understood the sanctity of mourning traditions. The memorial service itself was a grotesque pageant filled with Jane's crocodile tears and fulsome eulogies that made a mockery of Stan's memory. I sat hunched in the front pew, fists clenched as she droned on about what an exemplary father and provider he'd been. The hypocrisy oozed like runny eggs, and I fought not to retch. Behind me, Ashley's theatrical sobbing left damp patches on the shoulders of her overpriced dress. Only Mark's face remained impassive throughout the garish display. Finally, blessedly, it ended. The somber procession trailed out, leaving me alone to crouch before Stan's simple oak casket. With trembling fingers, I traced the carved initials as a lifetime of memories cascaded over me. His gruff chuckle, the gleam of mischief in his eyes, the quiet pride as I mastered caring for him. You didn't deserve this circus, Stan, I murmured, fighting the sting of tears. But I'll make it right, no matter what it takes. A faint scuffing behind me broke the reverie. I turned to find Jane framed in the vestibule, those hawkish features arranged in an expression of patented disdain. I want you gone in the morning, she pronounced flatly. The lawyers will be in touch about finalizing the inheritance? My voice sliced through her words like a scalpel. Yes, I imagine there's much to discuss on that front. Her brows knitted in bewilderment as I rose fluidly and brushed past her without a backward glance. Let the crones stew in impotent confusion for now. Soon enough, the tables would spin with such ferocity that even her unfeeling heart would reel. Tomorrow was the first day of a new future, one built from the wreckage of their betrayal. I only hoped Stan could see it unfurl from whatever tranquil beyond he now occupied. As I exited into the brisk evening air, Lawyer Jenkins materialized from the shadows like a wizard conjuring from the mist. "Shall we take this to my office, Miss Turner?" he murmured, those glinting eyes holding a universe of secrets. I nodded curtly, falling into step beside him as the sky surrendered to an inky everfold of possibilities. A tense silence hung in the air like a suffocating fog as we assembled in Lawyer Jenkins' austere conference room. Jane's eyes bored into me with the intensity of a laser cutter, daring me to make the first incendiary move. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, loosening his tie as beads of sweat gathered on his furrowed brow. For once, the smug veneer had cracked to reveal the fissures of doubt gnawing beneath. Ashley was a study in affected nonchalance, idly buffing her nails as if this legal showdown was merely an inconvenient hiccup delaying her next Instagram selfie session. I met their subtle provocations with an impassive mask, allowing the weight of their impatience to escalate the slow drip of unease. Finally, Jenkins cleared his throat and slid an official-looking dossier onto the table's polished surface. If we could attend to the matter at hand. He lifted his gaze to Jane, who was practically vibrating with accusatory zeal. "This is outrageous!" She sliced the stale air with a bony finger. "That woman has hoodwinked you into some kind of illegitimate inheritance claim using God knows what lies about my poor Stan's mental faculties." Mark opened his mouth, but she barreled forward with the force of an avalanche. "We have documentation proving our legal standing as next of kin. Whatever schemes she's concocted, they won't stand up to." "Madam," Jenkins' mild tone nonetheless carried an adamantine edge, "if you'll permit me." He withdrew a sheaf of papers, placing them squarely before Jane's mottled glare. "These are the legal adoption papers signed and notarized by your late husband over a year ago. They clearly state his intentions to establish Miss Turner as his legal heir and beneficiary." You could have heard a pin drop in the ringing silence. Jane's mouth worked furiously, but only garbled stammers emerged. Across the table, understanding bloomed like a cesspool on Ashley's face as she gaped at the documents in revulsion. "No." The whisper was a strained rasp of disbelief. "That crazy old bat couldn't have." Jane slammed her fist on the table with a meaty thump, sending a litter of pens skittering. "It's a forgery. Everything she's done since worming her way into our lives has been a ploy to swindle my family's rightful inheritance." With a weary sigh, Jenkins produced another folder, extracting a handwritten letter that he slid towards Mark's ashen countenance. "I regret this letter was necessary, but given your, shall we say, troubled family dynamics, your father insisted on making his wishes explicit and legally binding." The lawyer's gaze flicked to the apoplectic Jane. He knew there would be unpleasantness. As if in a trance, Mark's hand slid the correspondence closer, his eyes devouring each looping scrawl of his father's unmistakable penmanship. I could practically see the ground crumbling from beneath him, eroding every plank in the platform he'd so meticulously constructed around his hollow existence. It can't be," he rasped, anguish twisting his features. Jane snatched the letter with clawed fingers, gulping furiously as the damning text sank its hooks. A ghastly shade of puce crept up her jowls as the true extent of the reckoning became apparent. "You vicious little harlot!" She caterwauled the words in a glass-shattering screech, spittle flying. "You conniving gold-digging witch! I'll see you destitute on the streets before—" Her scream was severed by a violent coughing spasm that racked her frail frame. Jenkins calmly proffered a glass of water, which she swatted away with disdainful fury, only to crumple into a pathetic wheezing heap. The inheritance. Ashley's soft murmur was a blade in the unnerved silence. All those plans, all that money, gone. She turned her gaze to me, naked hatred scorching like twin blowtorches. "You hateful bee. That's quite enough." Jenkins rose smoothly, his tone hardening like carbon under compression. "Miss Turner's legal position as primary beneficiary of the Turner estate is incontrovertible. I suggest you come to terms with that fact and avoid further unpleasantness." The dagger of his stare leveled on Jane, still drowning in her anguish and rage. I held that malignant glare, allowing a fleeting glimmer of vengeance to glint in my irises. It was a meager victory, the opening salvo in a war that still loomed before me, but by God, I would savor it. This was just the beginning of my long-overdue retribution. The Turner clan's reckoning had only begun to unfurl. The weeks following that fateful meeting passed in a blur. Jane's mewling pleas for leniency fell on deaf ears as I steadfastly severed every slimy tendril still binding me to their toxic orbit. "Sarah, please?" Mark's voice had taken on a plaintive, haunted timbre as the reality of his situation congealed into inescapable truth. "We can still work something out, for old time's sake." I fixed him with a level stare, allowing the memory of every slight, every callous disregard for my humanity to galvanize my resolve. "Old times are precisely why there's no going back, Mark. You revealed your true self long ago. I'm just honoring that reality." His shoulders slumped in naked defeat as I turned and walked away without a backward glance. Any residual embers of affection had long since turned to ash on the pyre of their betrayal. Ashley proved equally obstinate in her desperation, resorting to the only arsenal she knew, petulant tantrum and hollow manipulation. "You have to help us," she'd wail into the phone, her words slurring from whatever substances she'd been abusing to dull the pain of facing consequences. "We're gonna lose everything. The house, Mom's stupid little shop, everything." I'd remain impassive, allowing the silence to underscore her spoiled pleas until she'd erupt in a torrent of profanity and slammed the receiver into oblivion. Let the brat drown in the miasma of her own making. I'd sung that siren song too many times to capitulate. Only Jane's fall from delusional grace carried any flicker of satisfaction amidst the morass. Once a vision of coiffed entitlement, her threadbare existence now consisted of a grim rotation of court appearances, creditor houndings, and desperate schemes to forestall the terminal diagnosis of poverty. "You don't know what you're doing to this family." She'd rage fruitlessly whenever our paths briefly merged. "Once the money runs out, you'll have destroyed us. Is that what you want, you miserable wretch?" I'd simply gaze at her impassively until her tantrum momentum burned itself out, leaving her haggard and panting on the cold reality of her own poor life choices. It took months, but slowly the tumorous mass of their financial ruin metastasized. The estate dwindled to a parody through reckless borrowing, till even the rambling house I'd endured so much misery within was repossessed. The day the moving vans rolled up to dispossess them of the roof over their heads, I felt nothing. No elation, no pity, no scintilla of regret, just emptiness. Through the plate glass window, I observed Jane's waxen pallor as the last vestiges of their tawdry legacy were boxed and hauled to parts unknown. Beside her, Ashley openly wept, huge, gulping sobs of the perpetually indulged. If I squinted, I could almost discern the faintest shimmer of a smile haunting Mark's hollow features. Some tiny fragment of his soul had welcomed this karmic absolution, this cleansing gale scouring the rot from his cloistered existence. As the trucks rumbled away, belching diesel exhaust, I allowed a fleeting reverie. Stan gazing down with a craggy half-grin and an approving nod for the protégé who'd carried his final sacred trust to its inexorable conclusion. The sun dipped low, banishing the departing caravan of change in ruddy brilliance. A new era beckoned on the molten horizon, and I turned to greet it with a lightness I'd never permitted myself in this waking purgatory. In the distance, a solitary bird issued a soaring, hopeful cry of liberation. Or perhaps it was merely the rusty gate of my personal jail finally swinging wide. The crisp autumn breeze carried the faint tang of wood smoke as I pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Rehabilitation Center. My pulse quickened with a mixture of reverence and determination. This hallowed ground represented so much of what I'd sacrificed, but also the promise of a new beginning. As I strode through the gleaming lobby, well-wishers and former colleagues emerged like a receiving line of ghosts. Polite smiles and handshakes blurred in a kaleidoscope of vague familiarity, until finally, mercifully, I found myself ensconced in the hushed sanctuary of my new office. The diplomas and certifications arrayed on the walls seemed to gaze upon me with mute approval. Reverentially, I traced the raised lettering of my physical therapy credentials, hard-won talismans that had been denied their full potential for far too long. A gentle rap forestalled any more introspection. Marcy, the center's merrily plump administrator, poked her head through the door with a warm smile. "All settled in and ready to get cracking, I see. Wonderful to have you back on the team, Sarah." I returned her smile, the first genuine one to grace my lips in recent memory. It's great to be back home where I belong, Marcy, though I can't promise there won't be some adjustments. She gave me an appraising look, eyes twinkling with humor. I have it on good authority, those famous Turner stubbornness genes have been passed along to the next rightful heir. A hearty chuckle escaped before I could stifle it. How strange and wondrous to experience such uncomplicated camaraderie again, without the lingering stain of bitterness souring every human interaction. As Marcy's ample form retreated, I settled into the supple leather chair and allowed my gaze to roam the empty office that would soon become the launchpad for my own personal renaissance. After years treading the threshing floor of misery and despair, I now commanded the territory of my own redemption. The hours melted away in a flurry of unpacking, form filing, and preparation for the imminent influx of new patients. With each passing minute, I felt the weighty shackles of my imposed identity steadily loosening their rusted grip. Sarah Turner, beleaguered ex-wife and victim. Those ashes had fueled the fire that would give rise to the radiant, self-actualized phoenix emerging from the cindered residue of oppression. I straightened the simple nameplate centering my new desk, permitting a sense of hard-won pride. The low December sun bathed the room in a warm, rosy glow as the day's final appointment wrapped up. I lingered for a few stolen moments, breathing in the atmosphere of freedom and purpose that still carried a heady novelty. A kernel of wistfulness tugged at the corners of my heart as I traced the names and numbers meticulously scrawled in the logbook, each one representing a battered psyche or broken body yearning to be made whole again. The whir of tiny wheels preceded Ruthie, the center's endearingly chatty custodian, as she trundled her cart full of cleaning supplies through the doorway. "You're still here, honey?" she asked with a sunny smile. "Figured you'd be halfway to that fancy new condo you're moving into by now, with all the celebrating I'd bet you've got planned." I chuckled at her irrepressible assumptions. "Nothing too fancy, Ruthie. Just taking my first real deep breaths of freedom." The older woman's eyes crinkled in empathy as she nodded. "Ain't no better feeling in this world, sweetie. You just keep on breathing that good air and letting the light shine on that pretty face again." As she bustled onward in a wake of lemon-fresh fragrance, I allowed those simple words of hard-won wisdom to permeate my very core. For so long, the veil of toxicity had obscured the path stretching forth, its twists and turns obscured in murky vapor. Now that fog had parted to reveal a shimmering vista, its horizons rippling with infinite permutations of potential redemption. My fingers tightened around the leather-bound datebook, a fierce sense of clarity washing over me. No more hesitation or existential pondering, no more cowering in shadowed corners. This was my life's chronicle. And from this chapter forward, its pages would blaze with the brilliance of 1,000 conquering suns. The dim-lit winery felt suffocating as I nursed my glass of Merlot, the rich aroma failing to calm my nerves. Mia's concerned gaze bore into me, her brow furrowed as she waited for me to break the tense silence. "It's Adrian," I finally confessed, my voice trembling. "He's been lying to me about everything." Mia's eyes widened, and she leaned closer, her voice hushed. "What do you mean? What happened?" I took a steadying breath, recounting the events from earlier that evening. I arrived a little early, hoping to surprise him before the tasting event started, but when I stepped into his office, I overheard a heated argument. The memory flooded back, Adrian's usually composed demeanor shattered as he hissed into the phone. "Kara, please, you have to understand." "Kara?" Mia's brow furrowed deeper. "Isn't that his wife's name?" I nodded, my throat tightening. That's when she walked in, this stunning woman, dripping in diamonds and designer labels. She took one look at me and sneered, "So, you're the latest conquest, hmm?" Tears stung my eyes as I recalled Kara's icy glare. Adrian tried to defuse the situation, but she wasn't having it. She turned to me and said, "Let me save you the trouble, dear. That man is a pathological liar, and you're just another pawn in his twisted game." Mia's mouth hung open, her hand gripping mine in a comforting squeeze. "Oh, Lena, I'm so sorry." I shook my head, anger and humiliation swirling within me. "That's not even the worst part." Kara then looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you think you know the real Adrian, you're sadly mistaken. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. Mia's grip tightened, her expression a mix of sympathy and fury. That's just cruel. What did Adrian say? He tried to brush it off, claiming Kara was just being dramatic as usual, I scoffed, the memory leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. But the way she looked at me, Mia, it was like she knew something I didn't, like she was daring me to uncover the truth. Mia's eyes narrowed, her protective instincts kicking in. We'll get to the bottom of this, Lena. One way or another, we'll find out what kind of game Adrian is really playing. As I drained the last of my wine, a newfound determination washed over me. Kara's enigmatic warning echoed in my mind, fueling a desperate need to confront the man I thought I knew. Adrian's web of lies was unraveling, and I intended to untangle every last thread, no matter how painful the truth might be. Adrian's mansion loomed before me, its grand facade mocking the turmoil that churned within. As I stepped through the ornate double doors, the overwhelming scent of wealth assaulted my senses, a sickening blend of expensive leather and Adrian's signature cologne. He greeted me with a forced smile, his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. Lena, my dear, I'm so glad you came. I held up a hand, cutting off his rehearsed pleasantries. Cut the act, Adrian. We need to talk. His bravado faltered, and he ushered me into the study, closing the door behind us with a heavy thud. I assume this is about Kara's little outburst, he began, his tone dripping with disdain. You know how dramatic she can be. Dramatic? I scoffed, anger flaring within me. She accused you of lying to me, Adrian, of using me as some kind of pawn in your twisted games. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair. Lena, you have to understand. My marriage to Kara, it's complicated. We've been struggling for years, and her family's wealth is the only thing keeping this winery afloat. My jaw clenched as the pieces began to fall into place. So, what? You've been using her money to fund your lavish lifestyle, all while carrying on affairs behind her back? Adrian's eyes hardened, his mask of charm slipping. It's not that simple. Kara knew about my indiscretions from the start, but she didn't care, as long as I played the part of the doting husband in public. It's all a facade, Lena. A game we've both been playing. I recoiled, disgust churning in my stomach. And what about me, Adrian? Was I just another prop in your twisted little charade? He reached for my hand, his touch sending a shiver of revulsion down my spine. Of course not, my love. What we have is real. Everything I've done, it's all been for us, for our future together. I yanked my hand away, his words like venom seeping into my veins. Our future? I spat, shaking my head in disbelief. How can you talk about our future when you've built your entire life on lies? Adrian's jaw tightened, his eyes hardening with determination. Because I love you, Lena, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make our dreams a reality. As he spoke those words, a chill ran down my spine. The man before me was a stranger, his charming facade crumbling to reveal a twisted, manipulative soul. And in that moment, I realized that no matter how deep my feelings ran, I could never trust a word that fell from his deceitful lips. The harsh buzz of my phone jolted me from my restless slumber. Groggily, I fumbled for the device, squinting at the caller ID. It was Mia. Hello? My voice was thick with exhaustion. Lena, thank God you picked up, Mia blurted, her tone laced with urgency. We need to talk, in person. An icy tendril of dread snaked through me. What's going on? It's about Adrian, she said, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. I've uncovered some unsettling information. Within the hour, I found myself at Mia's doorstep, anxiety gnawing at my insides. She ushered me inside, her expression grave. Spill it, I demanded, bracing myself for the worst. Mia took a deep breath. Remember Samantha Wilkins from college? The one who transferred after our sophomore year? I nodded, my brow furrowing in confusion. Well, I ran into her at the grocery store yesterday, Mia continued. And she mentioned something. Disturbing. My heart pounded in my ears as I waited for her to continue. Apparently, she and Adrian had a fling a few years back, Mia revealed, her words like a punch to the gut. And according to Samantha, he was stringing along multiple women at the same time, feeding them all the same lies about leaving his wife. I felt the room spin, nausea churning in my stomach. No, it can't be. Mia's expression hardened. That's not all. Samantha said that once Kara caught wind of Adrian's affairs, she went into full-on revenge mode. She's been gathering evidence, documenting every sordid detail, all to strip him of everything in their inevitable divorce. My head was reeling, Adrian's betrayal cutting deeper with each revelation. But why go to such extremes? Mia's gaze softened. Kara's family is obscenely wealthy, Lena. If she plays her cards right, she could not only take the winery but destroy Adrian's reputation in the process. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. So while he's been playing us all for fools, his wife has been playing the long game. Mia reached out, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. I'm so sorry, Lena. I know how much you cared for him. Tears stung my eyes as the weight of Adrian's deceit crashed over me. The man I thought I knew, the future I had envisioned, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed mirage designed to feed his insatiable ego and greed. But as the shock gave way to simmering rage, a newfound determination took root. Kara's methodical plotting had opened my eyes, and I silently vowed that Adrian would face the consequences of his actions. No matter what it took, I would ensure that he reaped the bitter harvest he had sown. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the cozy cafe, but its usual comforting scent did little to soothe my frayed nerves. I clutched my mug, the warmth seeping into my palms as I replayed Mia's words in my mind, desperate to make sense of Adrian's ever-deepening web of lies. A familiar voice sliced through the ambient chatter, causing me to stiffen in my seat. It was Kara, her perfectly coiffed appearance a stark contrast to the icy venom dripping from her words. That snake has another thing coming, if he thinks I'll let him slither away unscathed, she hissed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop. Across from her sat a well-dressed man, his sharp features and calculating gaze marking him as a force to be reckoned with, no doubt Kara's attorney. Rest assured, Mrs. Bellamy, he replied, his tone clipped and professional. My team has compiled an ironclad case against your husband. Once we expose his sordid affairs and financial misdeeds, the courts will have no choice but to strip him of everything. Kara's crimson-painted lips curved into a vindictive smile. Good. That two-timing snake deserves to lose it all, his precious winery, his inflated ego, every last cent. My heart pounded in my chest as realization washed over me. This wasn't just a bitter divorce. It was a meticulously orchestrated takedown, and Adrian was the unfortunate target in Kara's crosshairs. And those whores he's been cavorting with? Kara sneered, her eyes glinting with malice. They'll get their just desserts, too. I want their dirty little secrets dragged out into the open for everyone to see. My blood ran cold, the implications of her words sinking in like a lead weight. She wasn't just after Adrian. She was coming for all of us, his unsuspecting conquests caught in the crossfire of her vengeful crusade. The lawyer nodded, his expression betraying no emotion. Consider it done, Mrs. Bellamy. Your husband's indiscretions will be laid bare for the world to witness. As they rose to leave, Kara's gaze momentarily locked with mine, her eyes narrowing in recognition. A cruel smirk played at the corners of her mouth, a silent taunt that sent a chill down my spine. In that fleeting moment, I understood the depth of her fury, the meticulously plotted retribution that would leave no stone unturned, no secret unexposed. And as the gravity of my own role in Adrian's downfall dawned on me, a single sobering thought took root. I was well and truly caught in the crosshairs of a war I never saw coming. The winery's grand hall buzzed with excitement as guests mingled, sipping flutes of our latest vintage. But beneath the laughter and polished veneers, a storm was brewing, a reckoning that would shake the very foundations of Adrian's carefully constructed facade. I spotted him across the room, his charming smile firmly in place as he worked the crowd like a seasoned performer. My heart clenched with a potent mix of anger and remorse, the weight of his betrayal threatening to suffocate me. Before I could second-guess myself, I strode toward him, weaving through the clusters of well-heeled socialites until I stood mere feet away. Adrian, I called out, my voice ringing with steely resolve. He turned, his easy grin faltering as our eyes met. Lena, darling, what a pleasure to— Cut the act, I snapped, my words slicing through his rehearsed pleasantries. We need to talk, in private. His brow furrowed, but he nodded, leading me through a side door and into the shadowed confines of the empty barrel room. The heavy thud of the door closing behind us seemed to echo off the weathered oak, underscoring the weight of the confrontation to come. Adrian's mask slipped, his expression hardening. What's this about, Lena? You're causing quite a scene." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "A scene? Please, Adrian, we both know this entire charade is one big performance." I stepped closer, my words laced with venom. "I know everything. The lies, the affairs, Kara's meticulous plan to strip you of everything you've built on deceit." His eyes widened, panic flickering across his features before he regained his composure. "Lena, whatever Kara has told you, it's not just Kara," I cut him off, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "I've heard it from others too, people you've used and discarded like pawns in your twisted games." Adrian's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. "I see. So, you've chosen to align yourself with my vengeful wife, is that it?" I matched his steely glare, undeterred. "I've chosen to stand against your lies, Adrian, against the web of manipulation you've spun, ensnaring anyone foolish enough to fall for your charms." His lips curved into a contemptuous sneer. "And what, pray tell, do you hope to gain from this misguided crusade? A pat on the back from Kara? A fleeting sense of vindication before she casts you aside like the rest of us?" I stepped closer, my voice lowering to a fierce whisper. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions, Adrian. I want you to reap what you've sown, the pain, the humiliation, the utter destruction of everything you've built on deceit." For a moment, Adrian's mask slipped, his eyes flickering with genuine fear. But just as quickly, his bravado returned, a cruel smirk twisting his features. "Very well, my dear," he purred, his voice laced with menace. "If it's a war you want, you'll have it. But mark my words, when the dust settles, you'll deeply regret throwing in your lot with Kara." As he turned on his heel and stormed out, I couldn't help but shiver at the ominous promise lingering in his wake. But any trepidation was overshadowed by a fierce determination, a resolve to see this bitter feud through to its inevitable, catastrophic end. Come what may, Adrian would face the consequences he so richly deserved. And I would be there, standing resolute to witness his downfall. The stale air of the courtroom hung heavy, charged with tension as I took my place on the witness stand. Across the aisle, Adrian sat rigidly, his once charming veneer cracked and fading under the harsh reality of his impending reckoning. Kara's attorney, Mr. Morris, approached me, his gaze steely and calculating. "Ms. Rivers, please state your relationship to the defendant." I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Adrian Bellamy and I were involved in an intimate relationship for nearly a year." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Morris silenced it with a sharp look. "And during this time, were you aware of Mr. Bellamy's marital status?" My jaw tightened. "No, Adrian deliberately misled me, claiming he was separated from his wife." Morris nodded, his expression grave. "I see. And when did you become aware of the true nature of his deception?" The memories flooded back, the confrontation at the winery, the sickening revelations about Adrian's multiple affairs. It was brought to my attention by Mrs. Bellamy herself, as well as other sources, that Adrian had been engaging in numerous extramarital affairs while portraying a very different public image. "Objection, Your Honor," Adrian's lawyer barked, jumping to his feet. "Hearsay and speculation." The judge fixed me with a stern look. "Ms. Rivers, please confine your testimony to first-hand knowledge and facts." I took a steadying breath. "Very well, what I can attest to is Adrian's pattern of dishonest behavior and blatant disregard for the truth. He lied to me repeatedly about the nature of his marriage, his financial situation, and his intentions for our future together." Morris nodded, his expression grim. "Thank you, Miss Rivers. No further questions for now." He turned to face the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to submit into evidence a series of documented communications between the defendant and various other women, demonstrating a clear pattern of infidelity and emotional manipulation." As the damning evidence was presented, I risked a glance at Adrian. His usual bravado had crumbled, his shoulders slumped in defeat as the weight of his transgressions bore down upon him. Morris continued his relentless assault, painting a vivid picture of Adrian's web of lies and the calculated efforts to conceal his indiscretions from his wife. With each revelation, each incriminating piece of evidence, the noose around Adrian's neck tightened. Finally, Morris turned to me once more. "Miss Rivers, in your opinion, based on your first-hand experience, what motivated the defendant's actions?" I took a deep breath, meeting Adrian's hollow gaze head-on. "Greed and ego," I stated firmly. "Adrian Bellamy is a man consumed by his own desires, willing to crush anyone and anything in his path to maintain his lavish lifestyle and inflated sense of self-worth. A deafening silence fell over the courtroom as my words hung in the air, their weight undeniable. In that moment, I saw the last remnants of Adrian's arrogant facade shatter, laying bare the ugly truth that had been festering beneath the surface all along. As I stepped down from the stand, a sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. The wheels of justice were in motion, and Adrian's carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling around him. After so many lies, so much pain and heartache, he would finally face the consequences of his actions. The cavernous interior of Adrian's once opulent home echoed with a deafening silence, its grand furnishings and lavish decor now mere relics of a life built on deceit. As I stepped into the dimly lit foyer, the weight of his downfall seemed palpable, a tangible presence hanging in the stale air. "Lena?" Kara's voice sliced through the stillness, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she emerged from the shadows. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, my gaze drifting to the packed boxes lining the walls. "So, it's really happening. He's losing everything." A ghost of a smile played across Kara's perfectly painted lips. "Oh, it's far more than that, my dear. Adrian's reckoning has been a long time coming." She beckoned me to follow, leading me into the study, where Adrian had once spun his tangled web of lies. The remnants of his former life were scattered about, half-empty bottles of scotch, framed photos lying face down, a forgotten cigar smoldering in an ashtray. "Do you know why I fought so hard to strip him of all this?" Kara mused, her fingers trailing along the edge of the ornately carved desk. "It wasn't just about the money or the winery. It was about unveiling the truth, about tearing down the facade he so carefully constructed." I tensed, sensing an undercurrent of something darker lurking beneath her words. "What do you mean?" Kara's gaze found mine, her eyes glinting with a chilling intensity. "I knew about his affairs from the beginning, Lena. Every sordid tryst, every empty promise whispered in the throes of passion. I catalogued it all, biding my time until the perfect moment to strike." A shiver ran down my spine as the full extent of her meticulously plotted revenge dawned on me. "You used me, us, all of his mistresses, just pawns in your game." Her delicate shoulders rose in an elegant shrug. "A necessary sacrifice, I'm afraid. You see, Adrian's greatest downfall wasn't his insatiable appetite for infidelity. It was his arrogance, his unwavering belief that he could continue to spin his lies indefinitely without consequence." I recoiled, sickened by the calculated cruelty behind her actions. "So, what? You decided to teach him a lesson by destroying not just his life, but the lives of anyone caught in the crossfire?" Kara's gaze hardened, her voice taking on a razor-sharp edge. "Some lessons, dear Lena, can only be learned through the harshest of methods. Adrian needed to lose everything, his wealth, his status, his fragile sense of superiority, and if collateral damage was unavoidable in that pursuit, then so be it." As her words hung in the air, I found myself questioning the lines between justice and retribution, vengeance and vindication. Kara's actions, however calculated, had left a trail of devastation in their wake. Lives upended, reputations shattered, all in service of her single-minded quest for revenge. And in that moment, as I stood amidst the ruins of Adrian's former life, I couldn't help but wonder, had we, his unwitting pawns, simply traded one devil for another? The crisp autumn breeze carried the faint scent of change as I settled onto the worn leather couch, my therapist's gentle gaze fixed upon me with a patient understanding. It had been months since the explosive downfall of Adrian Bellamy, and yet the reverberations of that tumultuous chapter still echoed within me. "How are you feeling today, Lena?" Dr. Wilkins prompted, her voice a soothing balm against the memories that threatened to resurface. I took a steadying breath, gathering my thoughts. "Better, I think. It's been a process, coming to terms with everything that happened." Her brow furrowed with concern. "The sense of betrayal must have been overwhelming, not just from Adrian, but from Kara as well, using you and the others as pawns in her revenge." A rueful smile tugged at my lips. "That's an understatement. For a while, I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies and manipulation, unable to trust my own judgment." Dr. Wilkins nodded, her expression one of quiet empathy. "Yet here you are, emerging from that storm stronger and wiser. What has helped you find solid ground again?" The answer came easily. a newfound sense of purpose burning brightly within me. Helping others who have been through similar situations, lending an understanding ear, offering guidance and resources, it's been cathartic in a way. A proud smile graced the therapist's features. That's wonderful, Lena. Turning your pain into a catalyst for positive change is an incredibly brave and selfless act. As our session drew to a close, I stepped out into the crisp air, inhaling deeply. The weight that had once threatened to crush me had lightened, replaced by a steely resolve and a profound sense of growth. Later that evening, as I sipped a glass of rich Cabernet, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Mia, her voice tinged with a mix of sympathy and triumph. Lena, did you hear? Adrian's been spotted, living out of a run-down motel on the outskirts of town. A pang of something indescribable tugged at my heart, a strange amalgam of pity and vindication. The man who had once commanded such wealth and prestige had been reduced to a shadow of his former self, his grand ambitions crumbling beneath the weight of his own misdeeds. I did hear, yeah, I replied, my voice steady. It's a lot to take in, seeing how far he's fallen. Mia's tone softened. Are you going to be okay? I know this whole ordeal has been incredibly difficult for you. A soft, resolute smile curved my lips as I gazed out at the setting sun, its warm hues painting the sky in vibrant shades of redemption. I'm going to be just fine, Mia. In fact, I've never felt more ready to embrace the future, one free from Adrian's twisted lies and the toxic cycles of deceit. As I uttered those words, a profound sense of peace washed over me, a quiet affirmation that the darkest chapters of our lives possess the power to reshape us, to forge us into beacons of strength and resilience. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was crystal clear. I would never again surrender my truth to the whims of those who sought to diminish it. Adrian's reign of deception had met its demise, and in its ashes, a fiercer, wiser version of myself was rising, ready to face the world on my own terms. Today, I married a 22-year-old Emily, my upgrade from my ex-wife Renee here. She was just too dull for me. Greg's voice boomed across the crowded restaurant as he gestured towards me with a smirk. But hey, everyone makes mistakes, right? I froze, the wine glass slipping from my trembling hand as the blood drained from my face. The stunned silence of our table was deafening, broken only by the clattering of silverware and hushed murmurs from nearby diners. Greg's words hung in the air like a thick fog, suffocating me with their audacity. My mind raced back to the beginning, when I had first met Greg at a tech conference. His charm and confidence had been intoxicating, and I fell hard for his smooth talking and promises of a future together. Our courtship was a whirlwind, and before I knew it, we were exchanging vows bound by the sacred ties of marriage. But those ties quickly frayed as Greg's true colors emerged. The man I had fallen for was slowly replaced by a cold, dismissive stranger who seemed to take pleasure in belittling me. I found myself constantly questioning my own worth, walking on eggshells to avoid his scathing remarks. As time passed, the emotional distance between us grew, and I began to suspect that Greg's late nights at the office were more than just long work hours. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts, the furtive glances at his phone, all signs that I couldn't ignore any longer. With a heavy heart, I started documenting his behavior, carefully collecting evidence of his infidelity. Every missed call, every suspicious text message was meticulously recorded, building a case that would eventually shatter the illusion of our marriage. Greg's words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of the depth of his betrayal. But somewhere beneath the anguish, a spark of determination ignited within me. I would not be the victim in this story. It was time to take control and expose the truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days that followed Greg's humiliating outburst, I found myself retreating into a numb haze, grappling with the harsh reality of his infidelity. Everywhere I turned, reminders of his betrayal taunted me, from the lingering scent of his cologne on our bedsheets to the sickening messages I discovered on his phone. Sarah, my ever-loyal best friend, was a constant source of support during those dark times. "He's a lying snake, Renee," she spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "You deserve so much better than that sorry excuse for a man." Her words resonated deeply, fueling the fire within me. I couldn't let Greg simply discard me like yesterday's trash, not after everything we'd been through. With Sarah's encouragement, I started meticulously compiling evidence. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that could expose his duplicitous ways. Finally, one fateful evening, I decided to confront him head-on. Greg had just returned from one of his late nights at the office, his shirt crumpled and his hair disheveled. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my gut. He barely acknowledged me, dismissively waving a hand as he headed for the fridge. "Can it wait, Renee? I'm starving." "No, it can't wait." I slammed the folder of evidence onto the counter, startling him. "Look at these, Greg. Look at what I've found." His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to realization. "So you've been spying on me? Real classy, Renee." "Don't try to turn this around on me," I snapped. "You're the one who's been lying and cheating. With Emily, no less." A sly grin crept across his face. "Ah, yes, Emily. Now there's a real woman, not some uptight nag like you." The venom in his words stung, but I refused to back down. "How could you do this to us, Greg? To our marriage?" He let out a derisive laugh. "Our marriage? Please, Renee. That ship sailed a long time ago. I want a divorce, and you're not going to stop me from being happy with Emily." In that moment, the final shreds of my love for Greg withered away, replaced by a burning desire for retribution. He thought he could simply cast me aside and ride off into the sunset with his young mistress? Not on my watch. As Greg stormed out of the room, I clutched the folder close, a determined glint in my eye. This was war, and I intended to emerge victorious no matter what it took. With Greg's bitter words still ringing in my ears, I knew I needed to take action. Sitting idly by while he trampled over our marriage vows was not an option. It was time to fight back, and for that, I needed an ally in my corner. Lisa Turner came highly recommended by a friend, a no-nonsense divorce attorney known for her tenacity. Our first meeting left me feeling empowered, as she laid out the legal avenues I could pursue. "Greg's infidelity gives you grounds for a fault divorce," Lisa explained, her steely gaze fixed on me. "And with the evidence you've gathered, we have a strong case for securing a sizable settlement." A weight lifted from my shoulders. Finally, I had a path forward, a way to make Greg pay for his misdeeds. Lisa wasted no time in filing the necessary paperwork, setting the wheels in motion. In the meantime, I continued documenting Greg's exploits, paying close attention to his finances. It didn't take long to uncover a trail of overspending and questionable purchases. Expensive jewelry, lavish dinners, all likely ploys to woo his young mistress. One fateful afternoon, as I was restocking our fridge at the local grocery store, a familiar figure caught my eye. There she was, Emily, draped in an ostentatious fur coat that likely cost more than my car. Her saccharine smile turned sickly sweet as she sauntered over. "Well, if it isn't the scorned wife," she cooed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Greg told me all about how you've been making his life miserable." My hands clenched into fists as I fought the urge to lash out. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into, Emily. Greg's just using you." She let out a derisive laugh. "Keep telling yourself that, dear. Greg loves me in a way he could never love a frigid shrew like you." Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving a trail of her sickly sweet perfume in her wake. My blood boiled with rage, fueling my determination to take Greg down once and for all. With Lisa's guidance, we crafted a meticulous plan to expose Greg's deceit and ensure I received every penny I was owed. Financial records, witness statements, even private investigators, no stone would be left unturned in our pursuit of justice. As the court date loomed closer, I found myself filled with a sense of purpose. Greg had made the grave mistake of underestimating me, and now he would face the consequences of his actions. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden wife he had taken for granted. I was a woman on a mission, and nothing would stand in my way. With Lisa's guidance, I knew it was time to turn up the heat on Greg. No more playing nice. He needed to feel the full weight of his actions crashing down on him. The first salvo came in the form of a certified letter delivered straight to Greg's office. I couldn't help but smirk at the thought of his colleagues whispering behind his back, speculating about the impending legal drama. True to form, Greg responded with fury when he called me later that evening. "What the hell is this, Renee?" he snarled into the phone. "You have no right to do this." "I have every right," I shot back, my voice steady and unwavering. You brought this on yourself, Greg. Did you really think you could just discard me like trash and ride off into the sunset with your little mistress? His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smug, arrogant Greg seemed at a loss for words. From that point on, it was a whirlwind of activity. Lisa and I burned the midnight oil, poring over financial records and gathering every shred of evidence we could find. Witness statements, private investigator reports, even footage from security cameras, nothing was off limits. With each new piece of damning information, I felt a surge of vindication coursing through my veins. Greg had truly underestimated me, and now he would pay the ultimate price. Lisa proved to be a formidable ally, her legal expertise guiding me through the often confusing maze of divorce proceedings. There are different types of compensation we can pursue, she explained one evening as we strategized over takeout containers. Alimony, of course, to ensure you maintain your standard of living. But we can also go after a lump sum payment, as well as a portion of Greg's assets and investments. My head spun at the prospect, but Lisa's confidence was contagious. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to envision a future without Greg's shadow looming over me. As the court date drew nearer, the tension was palpable. Greg's lawyers tried every trick in the book, from character assassinations to spurious counter-accusations. But Lisa was a rock, her unwavering resolve a beacon guiding me through the storm. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. I took the stand, my heart pounding in my chest as I recounted the sordid details of Greg's betrayal. His lawyers tried to rattle me, but I stood firm, bolstered by the mountain of evidence we had amassed. When the judge finally rendered his verdict, the weight that had been bearing down on me for months seemed to lift. Greg was ordered to pay a substantial settlement, including alimony and a sizable portion of his assets. As the courtroom cleared, I caught a glimpse of Greg's contorted face, twisted with rage and disbelief. But for once, his tantrum didn't faze me. I had won, and nothing could take that away from me. The weight of the past year seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped out of the courthouse, the crisp autumn air filling my lungs. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was free. Free from Greg's grip, free from the turmoil that had consumed my life. As I finalized the divorce paperwork and transferred the settlement funds into my own account, a sense of vindication washed over me. Greg had tried his damnedest to break me, but in the end, I had emerged victorious, with my dignity and self-worth intact. Of course, Greg couldn't let me savor the victory without one last temper tantrum. As I was packing up the last remnants of my life from our once-shared home, he barged in, his face contorted with rage. "You think you've won, don't you?" he spat, looming over me with clenched fists. "Well, this isn't over, Renee. You haven't heard the last of me." I met his gaze with a calm, steady stare. "It's over, Greg. I've moved on, and so should you." Without another word, I brushed past him, leaving him to stew in his own bitterness. In the weeks that followed, I found solace in the simple pleasures I had long neglected. Leisurely walks in the park, catching up on my reading, and reconnecting with old friends. It was as if a weight had been lifted, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in years. Sarah, ever the supportive friend, insisted on treating me to a much-needed getaway. "You've been through hell and back," she said, wrapping me in a warm embrace. "It's time to treat yourself." And so, with my settlement funds safely tucked away, I booked a solo trip to the coast. A chance to reset and rediscover the woman I had been before Greg's toxicity seeped into my life. The salty sea air and the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore worked their magic, slowly but surely washing away the lingering ache of my shattered marriage. As I strolled along the sand, the sun's warmth caressing my skin, I marveled at the newfound freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim. No longer was I beholden to Greg's whims and moods, walking on eggshells to avoid his wrath. I was my own woman, master of my own destiny, with a world of possibilities stretching out before me. In those quiet moments of solitude, I found myself reflecting on the path that had led me here, the heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battle for justice. And yet, through it all, I had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more fiercely protective of my own worth. As I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I made a silent vow to myself. Never again would I allow someone else to diminish my light. The future was mine to shape, and I intended to do so on my own terms, without apology or regret. The months following my divorce from Greg ushered in a newfound sense of peace and self-discovery. I threw myself into my work, relishing the freedom to chase my ambitions without the weight of a toxic relationship holding me back. It was at a local charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite, that my hard-earned tranquility was shattered. As I mingled with colleagues and potential investors, a familiar figure caught my eye across the crowded ballroom. Greg, looking every bit the smug philanderer, with Emily draped on his arm like a gaudy accessory. I felt my stomach lurch as they approached, Greg's self-satisfied smirk seeming to grow wider with every step. "Well, well, if it isn't my dear ex-wife," he proclaimed loudly, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Renee, meet my radiant wife, Emily. We're expecting our little bundle of joy soon. Looks like everything is going right for me." Emily flashed a sickly sweet smile, her hand resting on the swell of her pregnant belly. In that moment, a wave of nausea washed over me, threatening to send the contents of my glass tumbling to the floor. Before I could react, the words spilled from my lips, fueled by a sudden surge of righteous indignation. "Congratulations," I replied, my voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. "How many men have fathered your supposed bundle of joys, Emily?" The smile melted from Emily's face as she recoiled, her eyes widening in shock. Greg, ever the clueless fool, simply furrowed his brow in confusion. "What the hell are you talking about, Renee?" I leveled my gaze at Emily, unflinching. "You heard me. Or did you think your little secrets would stay buried forever?" With that, I turned on my heel and strode away, leaving Greg sputtering in my wake. The weight of Emily's deceit, the tangled web of lies she had spun, no longer burdened me. In that moment, I felt a sense of liberation, a vindication that transcended the petty drama of my failed marriage. In the days that followed, whispers rippled through the social grapevine, rumors of Emily's sordid past, a trail of broken hearts and shattered lives left in her wake. It seemed that even Greg's wealth and status couldn't shield him from the consequences of his misplaced trust. One evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the office, my phone rang with an all-too-familiar number. Greg's voice, laced with desperation, crackled through the line. "Renee, we need to talk. Please, just hear me out." I almost pitied him in that moment, a man brought to his knees by his own hubris. But the scars of his betrayal ran too deep, and I had no intention of reopening those wounds. "Greg, it's over," I replied, my voice steady and resolute. "Whatever mess you've found yourself in, you'll have to sort it out on your own." His pleas fell on deaf ears as I ended the call, a newfound sense of closure washing over me. The path ahead was clear, unburdened by the baggage of my failed marriage. In the days and weeks that followed, I watched from afar as Greg's world unraveled. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, and the once charming businessman found himself shunned by the very social circles he had once dominated. As for me, I strode forward with my head held high, reveling in the knowledge that I had emerged from the ashes of my former life stronger, wiser, and utterly vindicated. As I left the charity gala that fateful night, a peculiar sense of satisfaction washed over me. For too long, I had allowed Greg and his scheming mistress to dictate the narrative, to hold the power over my emotions. But in that moment, the tables had turned, and their carefully constructed facade was crumbling before their very eyes. In the days that followed, the whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the social circles Greg and Emily had once dominated. It seemed that Emily's past indiscretions, her trail of broken hearts and shattered lives, had finally caught up with her. Reports trickled in of scorned lovers emerging from the shadows, each with their own sordid tale of Emily's deceit. Fake identities, fabricated pregnancies, entire relationships built on a foundation of lies. It was a twisted web that even Greg, in all his arrogance, couldn't ignore. The once charming businessman found himself increasingly isolated, his friends and colleagues distancing themselves from the unfolding drama. Gone were the days of backslapping camaraderie and exclusive country club memberships. In their place, a deafening silence, punctuated by sidelong glances and hushed whispers. It was during this period of social exile that Greg reached out to me, his voice tinged with desperation. "Renee, please," he implored over the crackling phone line. "You have to help me. Emily, she's not who I thought she was." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at the irony of his plea. "And you think I owe you anything, Greg? After everything you put me through?" His silence spoke volumes. For once, the smooth-talking charmer was at a loss for words, his silver tongue rendered impotent by the weight of his own hubris. "I'm sorry, Greg," I continued, my voice brimming with a newfound confidence, "but you made your bed a long time ago. Now you get to lie in it." With a decisive click, I ended the call, severing the last remaining tie to my former life. Greg's world was crumbling around him, and I had no intention of getting caught in the rubble. As the weeks wore on, the once powerful couple found themselves increasingly ostracized, their social status reduced to little more than a punchline. Emily's web of lies lay exposed, her carefully curated persona unraveling thread by thread. And Greg, the man who had once so callously discarded me in pursuit of his own selfish desires, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. The lavish lifestyle, the adoring social circle, the illusion of power and prestige, all of it had crumbled in the wake of Emily's deception. For my part, I watched the drama unfold from a safe distance, a silent observer to the karmic retribution that had befallen my former tormentors. There was a certain poetic justice in their downfall, a vindication that transcended mere words or actions. As I moved forward with my life, building a thriving career and nurturing healthy relationships, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the trials I had endured. They had forged me into a stronger, more resilient woman, one who would never again allow herself to be diminished by the likes of Greg or Emily. In the end, their twisted games had only served to illuminate my own inner strength, a resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times and into the light of a new, fulfilling chapter. And for that, I would be eternally grateful. 2 years had passed since that fateful encounter with Greg and Emily at the charity gala, 2 years of healing, growth, and hard-earned triumph. As I stood in the sleek, modern office that had become the headquarters of my burgeoning tech startup, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. What had once been a mere glimmer of an idea, a passion project born out of the ashes of my failed marriage, had now blossomed into a thriving business empire. My innovative software solutions were in high demand, attracting clients from all corners of the globe and securing my financial independence for years to come. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, of letting Greg's toxic presence dictate my every move. I was the master of my own destiny now, calling the shots and shaping my future with an unwavering determination. As I navigated the bustling office, exchanging friendly banter with my dedicated team of employees, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was my legacy, built from the ground up through sheer grit and resilience. Of course, the road to success hadn't been an easy one. There had been countless late nights, nerve-wracking pitches to skeptical investors, and more than a few setbacks along the way. But each obstacle had only served to fuel my determination, reminding me of the depths I had been forced to climb from. In stark contrast to my own ascent, Greg's fortunes had taken a decidedly different turn. Word had trickled down through the grapevine that he was now persona non grata in the business world, his once sterling reputation tarnished beyond repair by the fallout from Emily's deception. Jobless and shunned by his former social circles, Greg had become little more than a cautionary tale, a reminder of the perils of unchecked arrogance and poor judgment. Part of me almost pitied the man, reduced to a mere shadow of his former self. Almost. The truth was I had long since moved past any lingering bitterness or resentment towards my ex-husband. His actions, while reprehensible, had ultimately served as the catalyst for my own personal revolution, forcing me to shed the shackles of my former meek existence and embrace the strong, self-assured woman I had become. As I stepped out onto the balcony of my corner office, taking in the breathtaking view of the city skyline, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude for the winding path that had led me here. The heartache, the betrayal, the grueling battles, they had all been necessary steps on my journey towards true fulfillment. A gentle knock at the door broke me from my reverie, and I turned to find Nathan, my new romantic partner, standing in the doorway with a warm smile. Nathan, with his kind eyes and unwavering support, had been a beacon of light during those darkest days, a reminder that not all men were cut from the same cloth as Greg. "Ready for our dinner reservation?" he asked, his voice laced with affection. I nodded, slipping my hand into his as we made our way out of the office. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly, blissfully content. Not just with my professional achievements, but with the person I had become. As we strolled through the city streets, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of urban life, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and optimism for the future. The shadows of my past had been banished, replaced by a newfound appreciation for the present and all the wonders it had to offer. Greg and Emily were mere footnotes in my story now, relics of a chapter best left behind. The path ahead was mine to forge, unencumbered by the weight of past mistakes or regrets. And with each step forward, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, and more confident in my ability to conquer whatever obstacles life might throw my way.